kid, I was deathly afraid of storms. The sheer thought of a thunderstorm made me want to hide behind the nearest couch and curl up into the fetal position until it was all over. Now, regardless of this fear, every thunderstorm, I joined my family out on the porch and watch as the lightning dance across the sky. Of course, from underneath my trusty safety blanket. Now, you're probably wondering, if I was so afraid, why I continued to torture myself. Well, even though I was afraid of the storm, I knew that if I waited it out, I might get to see a rainbow. In my mind, seeing a rainbow was worth all the fear and unease I endured. That's a lot like our lives. We all go through storms, or unfortunate things that happen to us, things we can't change or avoid, like the death of a close friend or family member, or losing our homes to a natural disaster. During the storms of life, things seem scary and hopeless, but we have to realize that there is hope, that there will be a rainbow after the rain, no matter how unlikely it seems. What does it take to make it through life's everyday storms? We have to accept the things we can't change our attitude towards those situations, and seize the opportunities that arise. By doing these three things, we can overcome life's obstacles and learn to see the positives in them. Accept the situation, change your attitude, and seize the opportunities. Like many of you, I have been through some pretty scary storms. Now, don't get me wrong, for most of my childhood, I had what most people would consider a normal family. Sure, we fought and bickered, but predominantly, life was simple and easy. When I turned 8 years old, however, the normal life I knew came crashing down around me. It was around this time that I began to see a change in my mom. She started to talk, dress, and act like a teenager. She even traded in her minivan for a Camaro. She started to spend less time with her friends and more time with my sister and her junior high group. I didn't really understand what was going on at the time, but I now know that my mom was having a relationship with a 13-year-old boy from my sister's school. Obviously, my dad didn't approve of my mom spending so much time with a teenage boy, and so they began to fight constantly. My mom moved out, got her own apartment, and my sister moved in with her. My parents got a divorce, and my dad was granted full custody of my siblings and me. My mom was given visitations on Wednesdays and every other weekend. It was after my parents' divorce that I realized my mom got in trouble with the law and had to face the consequences for her actions. It was at this point in my life I realized I was in a storm I had no control over. I remember the first Monday after my mom's arrest, I dreaded going to school. You see, her arrest had made the newspaper. As I walked into school that morning, I kept my head down low, gripping the straps of my backpack, just hoping no one had seen the newspaper. I made my way through the hallway, avoiding every face. I thought if I acted like everything was fine, no one would ever know that anything happened to me. But as I walked into class that morning, I realized that everybody knew. My heart sunk as my teacher asked me to join her in the hallway. As she asked me how I was holding up, I still played it off as if nothing happened. But when she told me she knew everything, I began to sob. She looked at me, pulled me into her arms, and said, "It'll be okay, Krysti. The first step to get through all this is to learn to accept the things we can't change." When bad things happen to us, we have to realize that no matter how much we wish they didn't, they did. As long as we live in denial, things will never get better. We all go through storms. They may look and be different, but we all go through them. We have to accept the situations that life throws at us. I'll be honest, accepting isn't easy. Accepting means letting others in on what's going on in our lives. But by taking little steps, things will get easier. I started by talking to my best friend and my teacher. I stopped acting like it didn't happen when people asked. If you're going through a tough time, talk to a friend or a mentor. By letting someone you trust into your situation, it'll help take some of that burden away. By doing these little steps combined, we can learn to accept the things in our lives that we have no control over. Once we accept our situation, we then have to change our attitude towards our storms. Even after I learned to accept my parents' divorce and my mom's poor choices, I still viewed my situation as negative. All I could see from everything that happened to me were the bad things. My broken family, my reputation. Every time it got brought up, I would only think of the negative. It wasn't until about a year after my parents' divorce that I realized maybe everything that happens to us for a reason. And out of the negative, positive could arise. I remember coming home from school one day to finding my dad sitting at the kitchen table. I could tell by the look on his face that something was up. He asked us to take a seat. He then told us that he was seeing someone. I was so mad. I couldn't believe he wanted to replace my mom. Sure, she had messed up, but she was my mom after all. Later that week, my dad took me to meet the woman who would soon be my stepmom. The entire drive there was spent in silence. I couldn't believe that he wanted to force another mother figure into my life. All I could think of was that she was going to be like the evil stepmom from Cinderella. As we got to her house, I took my sweet time getting out of the car and walking up the steps to her home. Now, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that the first time I met my stepmom, I loved her. In fact, I hated her. How dare she try to change my family? She was a stranger, an outsider. I never thought my attitude towards her would change. About a week before my dad married my stepmom, she gave me a letter. I looked through the letter and was taken back by what she had to say. Krysti, lastly, I want you to know that I do not need to be your mom in order to be here for you, help you, or give you the support when needed. It is possible to love other people without them being your mom or dad. Well, Krysti, I love you and the person you are. This does not mean you have to love me in return. If you do come to love me, let it be on your own time. It was at this point that I realized I should let my stepmom, be a part of my life. My stepmom, who I now refer to as my real mom, has been my hero, inspiration, and one of my best friends. She has taught me to be the outgoing and thoughtful person I am today. None of this would have ever been possible if I hadn't made one simple, mature, tough choice to change my attitude. Through this terrible situation, I was able to develop a relationship with a woman who ended up changing my life. In order to do this, I had to change my attitude. I had to stop focusing so much on the negative and start to look for the positives. We all have the opportunity to see the positives in our negative circumstances. All we have to do is open up and seize the opportunities. Text FFA, you have the opportunity to see the positives in your negatives. If you get grounded, instead of being upset, choose to take responsibility of your attitude and seize the new opportunities. See it as an opportunity to reflect. If you don't make that team or office you wanted, see it as a chance to seek new opportunities. When we are no longer able to change our situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Remember, nothing positive comes from negativity. Once we change our attitude and accept our situation, we then have to seize the opportunities that arise from our storms. As an incoming state officer, one of the first duties I had was to attend and help out at the State Leadership Conference. The first night of camp, the current state officer team led a Vespers performance. Afterwards, it was our job as incoming officers to take our area teams aside and lead them in a discussion about that night's message. As I sat around my area officers, I felt compelled to share with them my story, the story I just shared with all of you. When I finished up, I asked them to start heading back to their cabins. I turned around to meet up with my teammates when I heard a voice call me from behind. It was a boy from my area officer team. "Can we sit down and talk?" he asked. As we sat on the steps of the main building, he began to cry as he shared with me his story. When he finished, he looked at me and said, "Thank you, Krysti, for sharing your story first. I would just like you to know I have never told that story to anyone before, but because you weren't afraid to share your story, I am no longer afraid to share mine." We hugged, and as I watched him walk back towards his cabin, I realized I could use the hardships I've overcome to make a difference. Now that I was out of the storm, I could help other people make it out as well. We all have the opportunity to use the obstacles we've overcome to help others. This can be as simple as talking to your friend who's going through a rough time, or using our experiences to offer them advice. We all go through storms, so let's use them to make a difference. Talk to that friend who lost a family member, or open up to that new kid in class. By showing people we are willing to share, we can help them make it through their own obstacles. All we have to do is open up and seize the opportunities. Texas FFA, I challenge you to not only make it through your own storms, but to use them to make a difference. If you look around this arena right now, there are 10,000 people just like you. Some of us are currently experiencing something we have no control over. Let's commit to helping one another make it through our storms. Let's use the things we overcome to make a difference. Making it through life's storms can be scary and even tough sometimes. But by accepting the situation and changing our attitude, we can seize the opportunities to help other people make it through their hard situation. Helping others and seizing the opportunities, seeing those positives in our negative situations, are the rainbows that life has to offer. This is how we can get by Texas FFA. This is how we can make it through our storms. And this is how we can help other people make it through their storms. As I learned all those years ago, when I would sit on the porch and watch the thunderstorms from underneath my blanket, there can only be a rainbow after it rains.